Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the second part of our Europa Universalis 4 Beginner's Guide mini-series, a short series where we talk about the basics of Europa Universalis 4. In the first video, we went over a lot of the interface and the buttons, what a lot of these buttons and numbers up here mean, the different menus, which there are a lot of, and we obviously haven't covered everything with that either, but we covered a lot of it. I tried to focus on more just what you need to kind of understand what you're seeing and hop into the game. So feel free to go watch that first video if you missed that. However, this video is going to be much more focused on the sort of heart of the game, which is warfare. EU4, you can play it without ever conquering a country, but it is generally a game of conquest. And even if you are doing a fairly peaceful run, you're probably still going to conquer some stuff at some point, or at least need to know how to defend yourself if other people try to conquer you. In this video, we're probably going to go over mostly just stuff related to the war stuff itself, as far as like how you get to a good position to declare a war. Well, that's going to be kind of something you have to figure out as you play more on your own, right? Learning when it's a good idea to declare war or not. But in general, you can kind of size it up by just looking at, for instance, your army, the army of your allies, and then giving a good guess about the armies of your opponents. There is actually a ledger where you can go and like look up what other countries have as far as their forces. So if you want to do that, it's not really cheating, but it's certainly giving yourself some more inside knowledge. But it makes sense that your country would have some intel about stuff like that. And yeah, so for instance, for us here, we have a decent-sized army, 14,000 men, 14 divisions, right, or regiments. We're about to have 4 more that I recruited up at the end of the last video. Castile, our ally, has a set of 13 and an army of 11 as well. So, all in all, about 45,000, 50,000 troops between us. Morocco, if I had to guess, maybe 12,000. Each of their vassals, 4,000 each maybe, right? That puts it up to the 20k. Tlemcen probably has another 12 or so. So that puts them probably in at 35, right? So you can kind of just get a rough idea gauging. We have maybe 50 regiments overall, and they have maybe 35. That gives us a good advantage. If you're attacking especially, you want to have a good advantage. And that's a good advantage. You also have to think about stuff like terrain, you know? So when we have this situation here, we start with Ceuta, a port here, right? But, so we have a way to reach this area easily, right? We don't have to trek across stuff. There is a strait crossing here to cross the Straits of Gibraltar without boats. But we don't even need that. We can start with our army over here in Ceuta. And I'm actually going to start on I'm going to unpause this here so our army can start getting in position. But you kind of have to think about some other stuff. Looking forward to this war, we have to think, well, what are our problems going to be? Well, one problem is that this is a very mountainous area here, this part of Morocco that we're going to be charging into, basically. If you look at the map, you can see this little crown here. That's because Fez is their capital at this point in time. And so Fez is going to be our main target. Really, whenever you do a war, just like you would in real life, you want to focus on defensive strongholds or, choke points. And you want to focus on capitals, right? So that a lot of times you want to focus on capitals so that you can separate piece out enemies to make it so you're fighting less people, right? Forcing people to sign peace treaties to get the war narrowed down to just your main target. That's a common strategy. And in this case, though, we can look around and see a little bit of some of the problems we're going to have in this war. So while we're in a good spot numbers-wise, the terrain here is not the greatest for us. Fez itself is mountainous terrain, which means if we attack into mountains and fight them there as the attacker, we're going to have a large penalty that basically is going to cancel out whatever numbers advantage we have, assuming all of our numbers are in at once on both sides. Additionally, they have a fort in Fez. You can see that if you hover over a province, it'll tell you if it has a fort or not. So we can go around and look. Well, the only ones that have forts are Fez and Tangiers. Fort level 2, fort level 3. And there's also a fort level map mode that you can look at to see easier. What does this mean? Well, the game has a system called using forts that essentially makes it so you can create stronghold checkpoints or choke points, right? Where enemies have to go past one spot in order to get further into your country. And this is where the game has some interesting stuff when it comes to warfare. So for instance, we have Lisboa, Lisbon here, right? Has its own fort because that's our capital. But we also have a fort in Evra. And so in Evra, what we can do, or what is going to happen, is that most enemies that want to reach Lisboa, they can't go straight there. They have to either go all the way around the zone of control of the fort, or they have to get the fort to then get access further in. Forts exert a sort of zone of control to every province around them. So in other words, if we wanted to siege, if someone was in our country trying to siege down these other things, they can siege them. But essentially, unless the fort is sieged itself completely down, those things will flip back to us and essentially be under our control without us having to have troops there. So forts are very, very useful and important. They're crucial to understand to be able to play this game. So when we have forts down here in our enemy's land, Tangiers and Fez, that gets to be a little worrisome because we have to go in there and siege down the forts. Additionally, with the way forts work, they aid the defenders in the people holding out in the siege, right? In combat. So in other words, if our army were to go into Fez and start sieging down Fez right when the war starts, if we were attacked there while our army is sieging it, even though normally, again, the defender has the advantage in the mountains, so even though if we're sitting there sieging it, if a army comes to relieve the siege and marches onto that province from their side, they actually get the bonuses. We get the penalties because the fort is basically making it so we're not actually defending. We're kind of trying to get in defensive position. We haven't gotten the fort yet. And so if you don't have the fort helps the people who are in control of it. Which is one reason why having a mountain fort is insanely valuable. Basically, for instance, in Fez, it blocks off this sort of pass here. This area here, High Atlas, is wasteland that is basically blocked off. It can't be traveled through. What essentially that means is that there's like right here with these three provinces, there's kind of a choke point where Fez exerts a zone of control, and if someone wants to reach like Tangiers, they have to either go all the way around that zone of control or they have to take Fez. And so what that means is Morocco, if they're at war, they could be off doing something else with their army. And Fez could be getting sieged, right? Sieges generally take a year or two, maybe. And so in that time, Morocco could go handle some other stuff and then come back, bring their whole army together here, and then attack and get the bonuses as if they were defending. Forts are very important for the play of this game when it comes to the strategic level of warfare. So here, we have our army buffed up a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and get it set up over here. Okay. So we need to attach to transport and go in here. There's a button here, attach to transport. We have some boats. We have 19 boats, but we're only carrying 9 of our troops because we only have 9 transports, right? There are 4 types of ships. We're not going to worry about that right now. I think we'll worry about that a little later, talking about ships and naval combat. There will probably be some naval combat in this upcoming war. So that'll be when we do that. For now, we just need to transport our troops over here. Our troops have this yellow bar. That is basically meaning that their maintenance is down. We need to bring up their maintenance before we go to war. Additionally, our fort here, our fort icon, which shows our forts, is glowing red, and this one isn't, but it is actually still mothballed, it's called, essentially on low maintenance mode. There's a button here where you can activate all your forts at once. You can see that this bar, instead of being yellow now, is now a red, mostly with a little sliver of green. And every month that we progress, it recovers a little bit. Every monthly tick at the end of a month, it gets a little higher as our troops recover their morale. I'm not going to go into the full nitty-gritty of how combat actually works, how it calculates the damage dealt and taken, and all that stuff. But essentially what you need to know is that this bar here, morale, determines how long your troops can fight. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how much damage they do. It just means how long are they willing to fight. And it'll go down as they take damage, but there's other factors that affect morale. And you can imagine how that's important. Even if you have really high quality troops, otherwise, if their morale is really bad and your enemy's morale is 5 times as good, which normally you're not going to have gaps that big, but if it is, then their army is willing to fight a lot longer, and they might beat you just on that alone. Your troops might be forced to retreat, which will make you lose your position. You know, your troops will retreat to somewhere else if they have enough morale to actually survive at all. And so yeah, so basically you want that bar to be full before you go into a battle. You want it to be full before you start a war, stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and get going here. Real quick, while we wait a second longer for this morale to recover, it is important to note that there's also 3 types of troops in the game: infantry, cavalry, and artillery. And essentially, we'll see a battle in a second where I can better show this, but essentially you want a mix of all 3. You normally want mostly infantry, and then a tiny bit of cavalry to have on your flanks, which makes sense, right? And then you want a lot of artillery to be shooting over the tops of your troops, right? A good composition early on is going to be a lot of infantry, like 4 cavalry, and then maybe up to 10 artillery if you can afford it. Artillery are expensive, and additionally, you can only have so many troops. And beyond that, you can only support so many troops, if I can find it, on each province. There's a supply limit map mode, which shows you, for instance, in Ceuta, our supply limit is 22. So if we had more than 4 additional troops extra, we would start taking attrition and losing manpower, and that's not good. So these are sort of the basics of when you're thinking about how to declare war and stuff. As far as declaring war, which we are about to do now, I talked about this in the last episode, but to get to war, you need claims. And claims you normally fabricate with a spy network. We have enough spy network now that we can fabricate a single claim. So then we have to decide what province do we want our claim to be on. The claim just gets you into war. You can actually take more than what you've claimed. You can take a lot of stuff, but the claim is going to be the stuff that you get less aggressive expansion for. Basically, if you conquer too much stuff that wasn't part of the claims, then people will start to get a lot angrier a lot quicker. What we're going to do in this first war, because this is not a long-term campaign, I mostly just want to show off the systems, we're going to get a claim on Fez, their capital. That'd be a really good province to get for a couple reasons. Well, again, it's mountains, it's got a fort already. It would be a very good province to have for the next war with Morocco or whoever else in this area. Right? In this war, we're probably only going to be able to take maybe 2 or 3 provinces. In general, early on in the game, you might take up to 5 or 6 provinces, it depends, in one war, but it'll be kind of slow. A lot of the early game of EU4 is conquer a good chunk of stuff from one country, but then wait for a while, digest it, add your administration to it, and get it all set up, and then your peace treaty's up, and you do another war, right? Rinse and repeat. You're not going to be able to conquer full countries at once, at least not a country the size of Morocco. So don't go into it thinking you're just going to fully conquer another country right off the bat. I mean, sure, if it's a small country like East Frisia, sure, you can conquer it all at once. But stuff like Morocco or even Granada is not going to be something that you're going to be able to realistically eat in one big gulp. So, Now that we have our claim, if we go in here to the declare war screen, sometimes you have to wait a day for it to update. There you go. Wait a day for it to update. Now, if we wanted to declare war on them, before we only had the option for humiliate rival, which is basically garbage. You don't want to ever really do it. It has some uses, but you're not allowed to conquer land when you do it, so it's kind of just used for prestige and stuff. What we want to do is we want to do a conquest casus belli, which will let us conquer as much of their land as we can handle. So we're going to do that. We're going to do a conquest. It's already selected for taking Fez. That's the war goal, right? Whatever you declare as the goal of the war will give you more war score once you take it. In other words, it should be one of your focuses as you declare war. And we're pretty lucky. All of our allies are actually willing to help us here. That's not always the case. Oftentimes, your allies will be like, I don't really want to help you. I have my own problems. In this case, we can call all of our allies in, which should make this war fairly one-sided. And we're going to declare. Oh, okay. Sorry. I forgot. We have a Regency Council. So we actually can't yet. I actually forgot about that. So that's just a quick little mechanic. When it comes to your leader, we essentially have a regent right now. And in a moment, in about when did it say? On the 15th of January of 1447, our regency will end, and our heir will ascend to the throne, and then we are free to declare wars. In general, you're not actually allowed to declare wars unless you have an actual king or queen or doge or whatever they might be on the throne. So this is a event that that can just pop up. There are lots of events like this. You don't need to ever really read the text. If you want to, you can. They give flavor. But there's hundreds of events, and essentially you can just look at the options and be like, okay, what do they do? Well, there's not normally ones that lead to more chains of events, if that makes sense. Normally whatever it shows here as the effect is going to be the only effect. So you can kind of just choose based on this. One stability being lost is pretty rough. If we go over here and look at stability, if we wanted to raise our stability, it would be 130 admin power. We only get 7 a month, so that's several months worth of stuff for one stability. On the other hand, 10 legitimacy, going from 100 to 90, not a big deal. So we're going to choose that. Lots of times with those events, I just quickly hover over both options, choose whichever one sounds better, or at least not as bad. In the case of that one, not as bad. So we're going to go through here, waiting for our ability to declare war. Okay, that was a good event. So that event basically just like, oh, Castile likes you more because you're both Catholic. One thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you always put a general in charge of your armies. Right, so if you have one, you should go to this button here where there's a general button. Choose a general from your list. If you don't have any, you always want to have at least one general that your main army has, right? And eventually you'll have more when you have more armies. Additionally, same thing, we have an admiral. In this case, it's an explorer, but that's a, basic. It's the same thing as an admiral. They just also can explore for the purpose of colonization and stuff, which we're probably not going to get to in this mini-series, but is an interesting system in the game. And while we wait a second here, I'm going to take a sip of my drink. I apologize. So, here we go. We're going to get to the 15th of January. And yeah, so we have our king has come to the throne, a 3-2-2. Essentially, that's adding to how much a month we get. You get base 3 plus whatever that is, right? It's not great. The values can go from 1 to 6, or, well, no, sorry, 0 to 6, if I remember correctly. Yes. 0 to 6. I don't think I've had a 0 character in a while for any of the values. But yeah, 0 to 6. 6 is the max. So you can see that this guy, our heir is actually pretty darn good. 563 is a fairly good heir. So essentially, right now they're age 0, right? So if our current king were to die, we would have another regency, unfortunately. But assuming that this guy lives to adulthood and everything else, we're set up once he becomes leader. So, we're going to go ahead and declare on Morocco now. While we were waiting for that, actually, we got a little bit lucky. We actually have enough spy power built up that we can get a second claim. And we're going to go for Tangiers in this one. This number on the right side basically means how big the place is in terms of industry and population and stuff. Tangiers is one of the smaller ones that we can get a claim on. The reason I'm doing Tangiers, though, is because for one of our missions here, we have a requirement to own it. So we're going to focus on that. We might conquer extra stuff, but we know we want Tangiers, so we should get a claim on that one. And we're going to declare war now. We'll set... Tangiers also has their other fort. We'll set Fez as the war goal. We'll call in all of our allies, and we'll declare war. Now that we have declared war, we can see their fort icons more easily on the map. Right here and here are those fort icons. What am I going to do in this war? Well, Ceuta, where we're starting, is Highlands. Highlands is not as good a bonus as mountains, as actual mountains, but we have a defensive bonus here. And a lot of this war is going to have to be done by our allies. We're not strong enough to take all these guys on by ourselves. In fact, in general, you don't really want to be jumping into wars being super aggressive. You want to kind of wait for them to come to you. Play the defensive a bit. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to play the defensive here. And at the same time, we're going to wait for Castile, our ally, to bring their armies over here. What I will do in the meanwhile, though, is I'll take our navy. We have a decently strong navy to start. I'm going to slow the speed of the game down to 3 now as well. And we're going to go into this naval battle here. This should be interesting. This will give me a chance to show you what naval battles look like. So on the battle screen, the noises are a little loud, huh? The battle screen basically shows you on this side all of our navy, and then on this side all of their navy. The percentage is just how close each ship is to getting sunk. And you can kind of see the basic numbers. How many ships of each type do you have and everything. You don't really need to worry about too much of this. The important part, really, about how combat works in this game comes with this dice roll. Essentially, everything in EU4 relating to combat itself, to battles, on land and sea, comes down to dice rolls. You have control over the dice rolls, but in general, it comes down to this dice roll, which is a 10-sided die. The roll can range from 0 up to 9. I don't know why they chose 0 to 9 instead of 1 to 10, but you know, whatever. So you can see, they rolled a 1, which is the second worst you can roll. We rolled a 5, which is in the middle, but decent. And that will basically compare... basically, that'll be how much damage are you going to do. You can kind of think of it basically, if you rolled a 9, the highest number, that's doing 100% damage based off your base stats of your units, right? Like, a normal infantry unit is going to do a certain amount of damage, and then it's modified by your dice roll. You could think of it as. However, there are also ways to get your dice rolls increased besides just rolling better, which you have no control over. Every few days a new roll happens. Your generals and admirals, their bonuses will be applied to the combat, to the rolls. So for instance, this battle is in the shock phase. Battles alternate between the fire phase and the shock phase. And this general, or this admiral, has a shock bonus of 3, which you can see right here. Basically, we rolled a 5, but because our admiral is good, it goes up to an 8. And that's a big difference. If we unpause, wait a couple days, you can see new rolls have been rolled. We're in the fire phase now. He's also got a fire bonus of 3, and we rolled really high. So that's really good. That battle is going to end probably in just a second. As you can see, their ships sinking. We actually captured some ships. So we gained ships from that battle, which is really great. In a second, we'll have a land battle, probably. In the land battle, I'll go into a little more depth with exactly what you're looking at when you see stuff like that. I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts and other stuff to kind of just maneuver my stuff quickly. That's not really necessary. Early on when you're playing, if you just want to look at these buttons, most of these buttons here have to do with like movement, splitting in half, splitting an army in half, or creating a new unit, which then lets you manually like split apart units. You know, I'm not going to go into all this stuff. A lot of that stuff is pretty self-explanatory and just stuff you kind of just need to look over in your own time. So yeah, I'm going to take a sip more of my drink while we are waiting here. So what are we waiting on? Well, Tangiers, with the way the fort system works, because Tangiers is here, we actually have to either siege Fez or Tangiers before we can leave their zone of control, right? We can go to Tetuan as well, but we can't go to Melilla or Saleh or anywhere else, right? Remember, we're also at war with Tlemcen here. We can't go to any of those guys, right? Let's say I wanted to go to Tlemcen here, to their capital, to siege it, right? Can't do it. Why can't I do it? Well, because of the fact that these forts are blocking us, right? So the fort has a zone of control it extends, and we either have to go around it, which we can't in this case, by land at least, or we have to siege it down so that it becomes our zone of control. And that's what we're going to do here. The one in Tangiers is also an actual fort, and what you can see is that the fort system, basically there's a percentage chance each month, each tick, this little green bar will fill up, there's a percentage chance that the fort will fall and come under your control. The percentage chance right now is negative, and basically as it goes on, it'll slowly get higher, and eventually we will have it fall, right? It's a die roll every time, basically, and yeah, eventually it'll be rolled enough times, and it'll go up high enough naturally that we'll get it. Most sieges will take like a year, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. So here, to illustrate something, what I'm going to show you is that as we get going here with our army, as we get going here, so by the way, Castile is the one doing most of the siege work itself on this fort, but that's okay. So I have started a separate siege of Fez, right? We are suffering attrition because we are, well, we're sieging, right? But the benefit is, of course, now we have 2 sieges going on, and so we're progressing this war quicker. What you can see is that when you siege down an unfortified province, unfortified provinces will always siege down immediately after the first tick, right? 100% chance of being fully occupied. And so what we'll see is at the end of this progression, this bar fills up, they're bringing an army over, possibly to intercept. But after we fill this up, we now have this province under our control. When you occupy a province, you get like a slight amount of money and stuff from them. But in general, you're not going to get much benefit out of it. On the other hand, an important thing to note is with the zone of control being how it is, if we abandon this siege and don't have any troops stationed there, I want to illustrate this, it will start reverting control. So essentially, if you don't keep control over it, in either just by manually having troops there or by getting the fort siege down, then it will flip back. Not that that really matters most of the time. All this is basically to illustrate that the forts are the biggest part of any war when it comes to occupations, right? You get war score from battles as well, naval and land, but occupations are really where you're going to end the war. Speaking of war score, I haven't really talked about this, but essentially the war score is this number. You can click on this button down here to see this war, an overview, right? And you can essentially see the war score here. Basically, you want to get it as high as possible. If you get it up to 100, you basically can demand a lot of stuff. If we go look at the peace deal screen, we're not going to worry about this just yet because we're not piecing out yet. You can like look at the country or the country's provinces you want to take, select them, and it shows you how much war score they cost. So we can see, let's say that we wanted to take Fez and Tangiers. That's 34 war score. Since we have 0%, they're obviously not going to accept. Most of the time, you need at least that much to be able to demand it. And even then, there's other factors. Lots of times they'll have war enthusiasm that is higher because they're defensive or because they think that they're going to start doing better soon. Right? Lots of times they will basically decide to keep fighting you even when you have the war score. On the other hand, sometimes if you're just overwhelmingly powerful compared to them, sometimes they will just give up the land a lot earlier than it would take because they realize they're screwed either way. And yeah, so it does a decent job of kind of modeling the system where the countries do take into account how overpowering they are or you are compared to them. And yeah, this war is going pretty well so far. As you can see, we have 21% chance now, every tick, that this will fall and become ours. This little wall broken thing means that we've breached the walls. It is actually possible to assault over the walls, like do an all-out assault, but it's very costly. I would not generally recommend it. Now it went up to 35%, right? It gets progressively easier, right? So like, for instance, this one is at minus 49% still. Now minus 42. This one jumped from 21 to 35% positive. And now it's at 49%. Okay. Sorry. So here we have a situation where the army of Morocco, as well as their vassals and ally, is going to come attack me in Fez. You might say, well, oh, you're in the mountains, you'll be fine. But remember, forts work the opposite way. Forts make it so that because I'm in their territory, busy sieging down their stuff, they're going to come in and basically relieve the siege, and they will get the bonus. Don't worry about this crossing penalty stuff. Basically, if you go over rivers, sometimes that'll happen, but in this situation, not very relevant. Essentially, when they come over here and attack me, which is not a battle I want to take, if I can, I'd like to run. It would take me until the 3rd of February. They're going to get there on the 31st of January, or 30th of January, actually. There's no chance for me to run. This is okay, though. We can retreat from this battle early, and largely it's good because I want to show off how this works, right? So they're going to attack me here. Actually, additionally, all of our allies are maybe going to swarm in here, so we might actually win. You can see, look at that, 50,000 troops there, another 15 there, another 6K there, right? We'll see. We might actually be able to win this. When the battle starts, what you can see is that it's very similar to the naval battle in that it has these dice rolls. Same thing, 0 to 9, but there's other numbers, right? Fire, from our general having good fire, and shock on the shock phase. Our general has a fire value of 3, so why is this not 3? Well, it's because theirs has a value of 1. It doesn't add to both sides, it just subtracts one from the other, right? And then adds that. You can also notice, though, that we have a minus 2. And that is from the mountains, right? Because they are getting the defensive bonus in the mountains. Mountains is a minus 2 to every roll. And so that can be pretty brutal. You really don't want to have to attack into mountains if you don't have to. Highlands and hills are 1 instead of 2. And there's some other ones too. Forests and marshes, they all give malices of minus 1. Mountains is the only one that is 2. So yeah, you can see that this battle's going on. We don't need to worry about most of these numbers. It shows the number of troops on each side. Additionally, the one major difference between naval combat and this is that there's a front and back row of combat. And really, early on, that doesn't matter. What it really matters for is when you get cannons eventually. When you get cannons, you can have them in the back row firing over your troops, and you always want that if possible. Artillery basically can fire from the back, dealing damage without actually getting hit themselves. And that's ideal. That's why artillery are so powerful. They can add another layer to your army, essentially. Other than that, it basically just shows your troops fighting, right? They're going to have more troops filing in now. we're losing pretty badly, right? As you can tell from the morale bar, right? Our troops' morale is just getting destroyed because they are getting better rolls, and also, yeah, you can see it, right? They just rolled an 8. I rolled a 0. Literally the worst result possible. Luckily, the shock is at least making it cancel out the mountains. Still, very bad. However, we're about to get reinforced. A lot. So now you have all these Aragonese troops filtering in. So my troops are going to start getting knocked out, but these Aragonese troops and English troops and Castilian troops are all flooding in. And we won, because they retreated. They didn't even let it play out. They knew they were going to lose that battle once that happened, so they retreated. But you can see, even with the win, we lost a lot more than they did. Right? And this is just mine. This is not even showing my allies. I lost about, what was that? 9,000 troops. That's pretty bad, because if you notice my manpower, I only have about 8,000 free to reinforce those missing troops. And I'm only gaining 150 a month. So that one battle basically wiped out my whole my power to really fight more than that. Right? I could do a couple more battles if I'm smart about it, but we really don't want to fight another battle like that again, or else we're just going to have no way to reinforce our troops. On the other hand, we've defended the siege. The siege is going to progress, and we're actually going to finish it quicker. As a result, we're going to finish the war quicker as a result. We're not going to be forced off and have to restart the siege all over again. Additionally, this one, 49%, there we go. So with a 49% chance, we finally won the Siege of Tangiers. And yeah, they have some ships there that are actually going to be forced out to sea, so my ships are going to go out to meet them. Right, we're going to do a naval battle. And otherwise, we're just going to keep sieging down these guys. So, that's actually a good spot to wrap up this video. Next video, we will continue this war and probably deal with post-war cooldown and recovery, you could say, talking about that and diplomacy and other things. Probably only going to be one more part after this, I imagine, because we've basically gone over kind of the basic loop. We'll go over some other stuff in the next video too, but thank you for watching. If this series was helpful or at least enjoyable, hopefully you enjoyed it. Please feel free to leave a like on it or share it with someone else who might be learning the game, picking it up for the first time. And yeah, I appreciate any support. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next part. Bye-bye.